Hello everyone, welcome to this episode. Today we are here with Lucas. He's the creator of Connecting the Dot podcast. So if you're interested in creating your own podcast channel, this episode is for you. Hi Lucas, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you. How are you doing today, Ava?
I'm good. Can you please introduce yourself and tell us about the podcast that you have created?
I would love to. So, 20 years old here at Queen's in third year. Can't believe how fast it flies by. And in my free time, I love to do Iron triathlon. It's been a recent goal of mine to get into doing and really enjoying it. And then also started my own podcast. And a bit of a left field, but the whole idea is unpacking the stories of people who have taken very unconventional approaches to defining what we call success in life. And I think it really came from being in a program, very fortunate to be in a good business program, but where there's such a prescriptive path for kind of what you can do in life and how you can be successful. And I personally didn't feel like I was fitting the mold. And I wanted to hear from others how they went about defining success, because I knew there were a million and one ways to do it. I just wanted to know from others, how did you do it? How did you overcome the hurdles? And what advice would you have on other people? And so that's really where it came from. And it's been so fascinating hearing these stories because one person I talked to had a really successful corporate career, but dropped it all to write a book about leadership. And it's become hugely successful, but it's not something you hear of every day. So it's very cool to shine a light on those kinds of things. And I've found it to be so rewarding.
That's a great idea. I listened to your podcast and I love them.
Yeah.
It was so cool.
Yeah.
I learned a lot. So what inspired you to come up with this idea?
I think first on that topic of untraditional paths, my entire life I haven't exactly fit into the mold per se perfectly, and so I really wanted to push that further and see for others how they went about doing that. But full transparency, this past summer I was recruiting for consulting and spent 2 months working really hard, casing, preparing, getting ready for these interviews, and I got told no 3 times, and it was really difficult to hear that. And it kind of gave me a spark to do something where I could tell myself, yes, that I am capable of this and I can do something. And I've always had the idea of wanting to write a book, but I never really had a why behind it. I just thought it would be really neat to hear the perspectives of a young individual growing up in the society with technology, navigating the challenges, but there wasn't really anything truly driving me behind it. And between being rejected 3 times and being in a program, again, that felt very prescriptive, it was what I needed to take that first step. And I'll be completely honest, I didn't know exactly what I was getting myself into, but I went from there and one thing led to the next, and I guess here we are now. So,
Did you learn anything from it? What was the outcome of it?
oh my
so
gosh,
far?
I've learned so much. I feel like every time I sit down with someone, I learn something new. And even listening to the conversations, for the 3rd or the 4th time, I'm still learning something new. So I'll try to just keep it to 3. I think the first thing that I've learned through this journey is you need to have a why. I mentioned that, but it is so fundamental when you're taking a risk to have a why. Inevitably, you're going to face challenges. Everyone does. But if you come back to why you started, I think that gives you the motivation to keep going when it feels like, oh, there's an easy way out and maybe I don't need to. So really being firm in your why and carrying that with you. The second thing I've learned is actually gratitude, which sounds kind of funny because what does gratitude mean in this context? Of course, I'm so grateful to have these incredible people on my podcast, but I look at it a little differently as gratitude through the opportunity to have a conversation. And that, I think, has just changed my perspective about any conversation, because there's always something to be learned from someone else. You can build a relationship, but you can also learn more about yourself. And I've just learned the importance of being grateful for every opportunity you're given, big or small, and not limiting yourself to what it can lead to next. So that gratitude piece would be the second. And the third thing, and I guess the final thing I would say, is about just becoming addicted to something, which I know we say, don't have addictions, but for me, I've really become obsessed with this idea of a podcast. And it's about building momentum. I started out, the first one, I had the episode recorded. I didn't actually release it for a month. and I was on the fence and I was still hesitating, but I just closed my eyes and I hit release and I went for it. The second one I did, I felt a little more comfortable. The third one, got really excited about. And the fourth one, I was smiling walking to class that day when I hit submit because of all this that went into it. And I realized once you start, it's so hard to stop because you want to keep going. And when you have an idea that you really want to pursue, start. It's hard. 50% of the battle is getting started, but once you get over that and you build, it just becomes so much fun. And I think that's something that for anyone wanting to start something, it should always be about having fun, but always try to remember that it'll get better.
Thank you for the great advices, and I can totally resonate with you. For my first episode, my mind was blanking, and then like after each episode, I got more confidence and it got more fun. Those are definitely good points. What did you find challenging?
No, there's so many things. I would say my podcast specifically, it being only 10 minutes long is something I've committed myself to because I simply I have the attention span of a goldfish at times. And so listening to something for 30 minutes, I can't do. But when I have these conversations with people and they're 30 minutes long and they're incredible conversations, having to boil it down to 10 minutes is so hard. And so I will often listen to the conversation 3 or 4 times and really try to think about what is something that not a lot of people have heard before that might really resonate. And it's just a different perspective. So it's not easy, but that's the approach I try to take. And then the second thing is building a brand. I have, I think, 74 followers on Instagram, which I'll admit isn't incredible by any standards, but trying to build the brand and gain followers, it's not easy, but I try to catch myself. And I try to remind myself that I'm not here to get followers. If I go back to why did I start this? It was to make an impact. And it doesn't really matter how many people listen to it as long as someone does. And I want to tell you something, a little story which I think is really cool. After the 4th episode I had about, it was on the topic of leadership when I met with a guy named Roy, really cool story. Someone actually reached out to me who had listened and said, that was so cool. Right now at work, we're actually talking about leadership, and we just played that for people to think about and hear some of his advice. And I was like, wow. I would have never expected to hear anyone say anything like that. And quite honestly, that means so much more than getting 1,000 followers. So there is a challenge in building the brand, but I try to catch myself there because I think it's building the brand in the right way.
Amazing. I can again resonate with you. I feel like even for a little amount of audience, if it has impact on them, that is enough. Yeah. And you will get to the goal, your first why, which is you want to have an impact, at least on someone. In your opinion, what does make a great episode?
I would say there's so many factors at play, and I will fully admit that I do edit my episodes because sometimes I'll have my dogs in the background and they'll start barking and I'm like, dang it, there goes a good episode. But no, what really makes a good episode, in my opinion, is coming in with a general direction of, I think, where I want the conversation to go, but then letting it organically grow. Mm-hmm. And by that, I'll maybe want to talk about leadership, and inclusive leadership is a topic, but then there might be something that's said and it wasn't on the script per se, but I want to explore that further. Mm-hmm. And so by that, I think that's what really makes a great episode, is actually taking my hands off the steering wheel a little bit, which seems counterintuitive when you're trying to tell a story and really unpack something, but recognizing maybe that's not where this conversation is supposed to go. Maybe it's supposed to go in a different direction. And I really think that has helped me, because the first one, I had this exact vision in my mind. I want to ask this question at this point and then transition. And then I realized, you know what? We're just here to have a conversation. So let's just talk. Mm-hmm. And it became that simple. Once I simplified things, I realized that's really what makes a great episode.
That's amazing. I will definitely keep that in mind, because I'm trying to keep the conversation go, as I don't want to be the one always talking, and I want the person that I'm hosting do the more talking, so that's definitely challenging for me as well. How do you balance being informative and being entertaining for the audience in your episodes?
That's a great question. That is a really good question. I'm not a big metaphorical person, but I I guess I'll give you a bit of a visual to think about. This is how I think about it, is when I go bowling, I'm not the best, so I put the guardrails up. I know I'm not going to go completely out of bounds. I'll keep it in bounds, but anything can happen. And for me, when I look at my podcast, I have topics that I want to touch on. Those are the guardrails, and they give me direction for the conversation. Within that, it can go anywhere. And the entertaining piece, I think, just comes from the excitement of what are we going to talk about, and bringing in personal experiences, admitting the challenges and being vulnerable with when things haven't worked out, because I think that's also so relatable to people. So I would say that same idea of letting your hands off the wheel does help sometimes with making it entertaining, but of course you want to be informative. And having conversations at a time, you'll sit down for 5 minutes and say, here's generally what I want to talk about, but I'm just getting this figured out for the first time too, right? And once I say that, I think people are able to take a bit of a breath and realize, by no means am I an expert here. I'm just figuring things out. And so it's as simple as a conversation. So let's just have fun with it.
Yeah. I forgot to ask you this. Who were the speakers that you invited to your podcast so far?
Certainly. I've had 4, and each one has been incredible. The first, Carl Oxholm, who I mentioned, he was the one who wrote that book, Biology of Leadership. He's actually one of Forbes' best-selling books on leadership, so really incredible story. And just such a cool outlook on life, very philanthropic, and just huge on the emotional intelligence side of things. The second person that I met with was a woman named Sarah Arland-Adam, and she was actually an expert witness, but previously heavily involved in academia. And that conversation more stemmed on systemic barriers and adversities she faced as a woman minority in education, as well as being an expert witness. The third person, a guy by the name of Mike Murray, who actually got to meet here, Queen's alumni, really cool guy who co-founded his own mid-market private equity firm, but at the same time pursues Ironman triathlon. And I just thought to myself, wow, how in the world do you do both? And at such a high level. So really enjoy hearing his stories and how he finds that work-life balance and his Zen state, as he likes to call it. And then the most recent one, a guy by the name of Roy Bennon, who is the president and CEO of the beer store, but took a very untraditional path to get there. In fact, actually took pay cuts at time in his career to work in different departments to get the experience that he felt he needed to become CEO one day. But really that conversation was about placing a big bet on himself. And I love that idea of betting on yourself. I think it's so important. I don't think people do it enough. Maybe they go to the casino and gamble, but place the bet on yourself because there's nothing to lose there. So those are the 4 guests, and I've been incredibly grateful to have conversations with them.
A lot of cool people, and I believe that you had learned a lot from them.
Oh, so much. So I often, we'll walk to class and we'll just pop in my earbuds and listen again, because there's always little nuggets of information that I can take away. But what I think is so cool is when I talk to them appreciating me reaching out. And it always feels like they're doing me a favor, but they're like, no, I haven't had many opportunities to sit down like this and actually really reflect on my career, the challenges I've had, and if I look back on what I've done, what advice would I give to a younger person? Mm-hmm. And so by that token, I do think it is really cool to build these relationships too.
Of course. I listened to your first episode and you said that you had this idea for a couple of years, but you just started it this year. What motivated you to start it? And I'm pretty sure everyone has doubts to start something new. How did you overcome that?
Certainly. So I guess on the first piece, like I mentioned a bit earlier, the failure and the rejection piece, I think really gave me a bit of a spark, but also just attending a lot of networking events where, again, that prescriptive path, it felt so forced. It felt like we were a bunch of sheep just being herded together. And I didn't want to succumb to that. So it was a bit of a realization moment combined with the rejection piece that really prompted the starting of it. But again, in terms of, I guess the second part was more the advice on starting something. Was that right?
To my second question, which is what is your advice for students who has a unique idea but are hesitant to take steps towards it?
No, it is not easy, I will admit, But then at times it is easy, and it's like, this doesn't make sense. So there's a few things I'd share. The first is start. And before you're getting going, when you're thinking about it, just start. And start simple, start small. When I talked with Carl, something he told me was that set the bar so low, you can't help but succeed. And I kind of laughed at that because I'm like, Carl, that's ridiculous. But he's like, the number of people who have this ambitious idea and they want to see it come to fruition, but they don't make it easy for themselves. Just build some momentum. And it's 50% of the battle, but just start. He even painted a picture in my head and he said, if you want to start by doing a 5K, start as small as just walking to the end of your street and back, and then running to the end of the street and back. Carl, that's ridiculous. And he's like, but it's true. You build the habit, and you build a good habit, and you continue to develop on it. And again, that idea of momentum. You carry yourself, and we're capable of so much more than we give ourselves credit for, but I think we need to start, and we need to see that we can really do it. So the first piece is to start. The second thing I would say is when you're getting going, you're gonna have doubts, but I like to think of it as be shameless and be excited to share. When I first got going and I was sharing this idea with people, I felt like if I didn't have someone really reputable on my podcast, I didn't have a big brand, a big name, no one would take me seriously. But I realized it doesn't really matter who's on your podcast, it's about the message. And again, it's what I'm after, it's why I'm after it. So I just got really excited telling people about my vision and my idea. And then what I started to realize was that the more people I told about this, I started to get feedback and advice on, oh, this would be a really cool person to have in your podcast, or this would be a really neat angle and something that you should consider when you're having your episodes. And I just, for so long, I was worried about sharing the idea. And then I realized, let's just talk to a lot of people about it and let's just get excited about it. And so that was the second thing. And then the third and last thing I would say is, again, coming from another podcast episode I had with a guy named Mike, who I mentioned earlier. He gave me this really cool analogy, which is the rocking chair test, about how when you're at the end of your career and you're in your 70s or 80s or 90s, sitting in a rocking chair and reflecting on your life, you look back at the different moments and you'll be able to see some of the big decisions you chose to make or maybe not to make. And it'll be pretty evident then if you have a regret for something you didn't do. For me, I realized if I'm in that position and I have a regret for not starting this podcast, that's gonna be a really crappy feeling. But the flip side is there's so much potential. And so for anyone who's on the fence, just think about being in that rocking chair, about how proud you would be of yourself looking back to see that you went for it. But on the flip side, how much regret you'd have for not. And I think it's when you make it that simple, just start and just see what happens. So those are the three things I'd leave people with.
Those were great advices, which I feel is applicable to everyone. I totally agree with you. You need to start it, you need to fail, and you will just learn, and you will just start something new if that failed. So definitely. Do you have any last words to our audience?
First of all, I just want to say I've really enjoyed being able to chat with you today. It's kind of crazy because for me, I look at this idea and I'm still learning every day. And I'm still growing every day. And that's what I love about it, is that I probably won't have this thing figured out for another few years. In fact, I may not ever have this podcast thing figured out, but I love that because it's the idea that there's more to grow and more to build off of. There's a personal affirmation to go by. It's no risk, no story. It actually comes from a recent Queen's alum who was the first person to ever do an Ironman in the Arctic, which is mind-boggling. But for me, the idea of no risk, no story really boils down to let's just push the boundaries of what's possible and the limitations we put on ourselves. I think when you start to push beyond the boundaries, we start to realize we're capable of so much more than we give ourselves credit for. So do that. And the piece in the story part is the story might be, maybe it turns into a huge success. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it just turns into a simple learning that turns into another huge success. You really don't know, but why not try? So I really want to leave people with that, but I also just want to say thank you so much for the opportunity today. Really enjoyed chatting, and I hope, again, this can help people who are listening.
It was great to have you. I'm pretty sure this episode is going to be so inspiring. You gave a lot of good advices, and we're so happy to have you. Thank you, Lucas.
Thank you.